Welcome to Authors Revealed. I'm Becky Anderson. I'm thrilled. One of my favorite children's authors, Katherine Applegate. She won the Newbery Medal for The One and Only Ivan, and now there's a nonfiction book, Ivan, the remarkable true story of the shopping mall gorilla. Katherine, welcome back to Anderson's in Naperville.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to be here.
This
is like a second home.
Well,
I just
good.
love
Well,
it.
we love seeing you, and thanks for coming and seeing us.
Oh, it's so good to be here.
Yeah. So it's been a while. Well, no, I think you were back, but I think since you were here for our children's literature breakfast, and that was in 2012, something pretty big happened right after that, or a year later, basically. That little medal they call a Newbery medal.
A little bit of jewelry.
A little jewelry.
I was a little disappointed because I pictured this medal on a string, an Olympic kind of medal. So I was prepared to wear it to Target and everywhere else. And it turns out it's just a beautiful little bronze round medal. Jack Gantos told me that I asked him what he did with his, and he said he kept it in the freezer, and then he used it to imprint butter molds when he had guests over to impress them.
Yeah, nice.
But mine's sitting there on my desk.
Yeah,
and
it's in a nice box, though, right?
Oh, it's a great box.
Right.
Very, very
I think you
nice
need to
box.
put a nice ribbon on it and wear it
It's so cool. It was like getting hit by lightning. It was just,
I bet.
so remarkable, and I felt so lucky. And truly, you could take 15 different librarians and sit them down, and they would come up with a different book. I know I was very lucky. I tried to.
Well, we were rooting for you. We knew that was going to be the one. So But that was so great for you to be at that breakfast, and the book had just been out a couple of weeks, I think, literally, when you came to our children's breakfast that morning.
Is a great, very fun event. But my memory of it is that it was kind of a debacle for me technologically. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, there was a problem with you. Right. Yeah.
Just about nothing worked for me. But I've refined my technique since.
Oh, good. Well, you should, now that you have that piece of metal. So
True.
You should.
Yeah, I've upgraded.
So now that Ivan won the Newbery Medal, and I know you did some schools with us today. So what has changed, and what is it, since it's been it's been 3 years since the book actually came out, and we finally have a paperback because the book was doing so well in hardcover that they kept postponing the paperback. And we love selling hardcovers. We do.
I suspect that may have been the marketing strategy.
Yeah, but you're out on tour now. So what is it like now than what it was maybe 3 years ago when you were touring when the book first came out?
That's an interesting question because so many kids are familiar with the story
Right,
at this point.
right.
And a lot more is available online. So often I go into a school and most of the kids have read the story.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot more about technique and how I put the story together. And they have really insightful, amazing questions.
Yeah.
It's but you do feel a little more like a rock star.
Yeah, well, you should. You should.
I've been telling my kids this, and they're like, "Yeah, right, Mom." But it's true. It's really remarkable.
Yeah.
And I'm thrilled that particular story is the one that I'd written of my many that is reaching kids because it was an important story.
Yeah.
And it was a very touching and sad story.
Yeah. Well, it touched a lot of us adults too, So it really did. So, how has your life changed? Would you say as a writer, but also, just as a person? Winning this medal where, you go on the Today Show a few days after, it's announced. And
But
the whole
you
thing.
don't anymore.
Oh, I know, I don't. Well, you were, yeah. Right.
That was, when did they stop doing
I don't know when they
that?
stopped doing it. But how has it changed for a writer? And when you sit down to write something else, is it sort of like, how do I do this after I've won the godmother of all book awards?
I've asked a lot of Newbery people about this. It's kind of funny because after you win, you get all these emails from assorted Newbery winners, and they have advice for you. And the thing I kept asking them was, so how do I write my next book now? Because of course I'm terrified. And I was right between books. It was unfortunate timing. A lot of them said, well, I was already well into another book. So it wasn't as traumatic as it might have been.
Right.
And it's a good kind of trauma, don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah. Right.
But it does make you, you're a little more self-conscious because you know it's
bet,
going to be
I
looked
bet,
at.
yeah. So writing the nonfiction picture book, which was, it's so wonderful to have this companion piece. Was that a lot of fun to do that and to do a picture book? Because you're used to doing many different genres, but not so much the picture book. So how was that doing and putting all that you had put into the novel, but now putting into a more informational piece, for younger kids?
It made me nervous because the thing about fiction writing is you can make stuff up and nobody's going to call you on it.
Right.
And there I was, trying to make sure I had all my facts right. That was a little dicey.
Yeah.
So I double checked and triple checked everything, but to be able to kind of synthesize it and get it down to a manageable size was useful.
Right.
And then Brian Karras'
I love his
illustrations were
illustrations.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
So moving. And he told me he went to, it was probably the Brooklyn Zoo, and spent a lot of time there just observing the gorillas because it's very hard to communicate expression with those faces, and yet he did it. You could see the terror in the baby's eyes, you could see the delight, and so I thought that was, to collaborate with an illustrator is so fun.
Yeah. Because so many times when people do, and this is nonfiction, an informational picture book,
Right.
but so many times the author never gets to meet the illustrator. So you must have had a lot of back and forth.
Lots of
with
back
him.
and forth, and then we had a wonderful editor, Ann Hoppy.
Oh, I love Anne.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
She's just amazing, and she really made that whole thing happen. It was pretty much her idea. And we tried to all connect in New York one time and couldn't quite pull it off, but we were emailing constantly, and so it was. It was funny. After the book came out, was the first time that I actually spoke to Brian. We were doing an interview together, and I learned fascinating things about the actual process of him putting it together as we were chatting.
Yeah. So, now that the paperback's out and it's 3 years later, this book is so rare, I think. And for us as booksellers, we could not wait to put it into readers' hands. And it wasn't just kids we wanted to tell about, but we wanted to give it to adults too. Have you heard a lot about that because of the adult readers that come to this book? Whether it's an educator or a parent who probably has been moved as much as any child that reads this book. Have you heard a lot of stories about adults talking about this?
It's been used in high schools. It's been used in grad schools as a source book, a textbook. But my favorite story is a third grade teacher was telling me the other day, and she was reading it to her class, and she started bawling at a particularly hard point.
Well, we know a lot of people, we don't want to do spoilers.
No spoilers.
Yes.
And one of her students walked up, grabbed a box of Kleenex, walked over, pushed her off the chair, and picked up the book and just took over reading. And it is interesting how it affects adults. I know adults who say, I can't read it. I can't read about animals.
Right.
And I think a lot of us are soft-hearted that way.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to all those dog stories, or
I know.
where the dog dies.
The dog always dies,
right?
yes, I know.
Yeah. Well, I want to tell you, I was there at your Newbery speech here in Chicago, and you got your medal, and I love the speech. But I especially liked the part where I think you were reminded that you still had to scoop the kitty litter. You had mentioned that your husband Michael.
That's just one of many duties.
But I loved your speech, and what was it like talking to that room of people and getting up and accepting that medal? Because your speech was priceless. It was good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was, oh man, when you find out, when you talk to the Newbery Committee, you're of course stunned into silence, and then you're ecstatic for maybe 5 minutes, and then you go, oh no, I have to do that speech. And it's such a burden because you just want to get it right. And I wanted to be honest about who I am, and I'm an old tired hack, and I've written a lot of not so good books, and so I wanted it to be lighthearted. I didn't but I also wanted to express how grateful I was. So to get that nuance was a little bit tough. The nice thing is they make you write it really early.
They do, and they record you.
You record it.
Right.
And so that way Hornbook can have it, and they can have it on a CD. And so at least I got it over with.
Yeah.
But
so the nervousness of what it was going to be was a little bit less.
A little bit. Oh,
less,
not much
right.
there.
Yeah,
no,
right.
I did not eat before the speech. Let's put it that way. Someone said to me, "You're not going to eat. No one eats. None of the speech makers eat at all."
Yeah,
so.
right. So, going back, and where did the idea of that seed start to grow? And I know it's something you had read a long time ago about Ivan and being in this mall zoo. But where did the seed start, and why did it take you so long after hearing that story to then sit down and write the novel?
Boy, if I knew that, I'd have written a lot more books by now.
Well, we all read something and you go, oh, that would be, you know.
Sometimes it has this just really long gestation
Right, sure,
period.
sure,
It was a long
yeah.
one. There was a New York Times article, and it read, "Gorilla sulks in Tacoma Mall as his future is debated." This must have been 20 years ago at least. And I thought, wow, that is bizarre and heartbreaking, and I really want to tell the story. Cut it out, put it in my idea box.
Yeah,
I believe all writers should have an idea box.
Yeah, right.
And went back to it several times, but writing first-person gorilla was so hard. I felt I didn't want to be too anthropomorphic. And the first time I wrote it, this is Anne disputes this story, but I wrote it as essentially nonfiction. It was very journalistic. Told the story, and I sent it to her, and she said, "Catherine, this is beautiful, but I can't sell a pamphlet."
I can see her saying that. Yeah,
and so I went back and fictionalized it, which had been my initial instinct, and that helped.
Yeah. So how did you get his voice? Because you so are one with him, you know, and it's not like you're channeling your inner gorilla, but how did you get this voice of this gorilla? You know, he spends 22 years inside of this small space before, you know, this movement to get him released, and he's taken to Zoo Atlanta. So how did you get that voice? I mean, did it take a while to really feel and then really get into it, you know?
Did it? I mean, I at the school visits today, I have this author photo, my official author photo is me sitting on a bed, and I have curlers and, you know, bunny slippers and really ugly pajamas, and I had my children take a ream of typewriter paper and crumple it at, you know, many reams, and I'm surrounded by a mountain of crumpled paper. Yeah. And I show that to kids because I want them to know that's what writing's like. It's about rewriting. And for his voice, oh man, there was a lot of rewriting, a lot. Yeah. I decided I wanted, that they're very majestic creatures. I wanted him to be a gorilla of few words. I wanted a certain poetic sound, philosophical. But that was so arbitrary. I could have gone a whole different way.
Yeah, yeah. So the research, tell us the research you did initially for the novel, The One and Only Ivan. And then did you do any more when you wrote the nonfiction piece?
Yeah.
Because I could love that piece in the back of the picture book that, you know, that shows the pictures of Ivan and the other baby gorilla who he came to the zoo with, who died soon after arrived from Africa.
That's really touching because you see them and they're dressed in human clothes. Right. And it was nice too. What I loved about that book, they have an afterword by Jodi Kerrigan, who was his keeper, and that was a nice touch, I thought too, because you get a sense of her. They were best friends, literally to the end. As much as he became a gorilla again, he still interacted with humans. So that was a nice thing to have in the book. For research, it was fun. I love doing research because it's a great way to procrastinate.
Right.
And I am quite good at that. And I went to Tacoma. I went to the mall in question, which is still in existence, and poked around, and his cage is still there. And then I went to the Tacoma, God bless librarians, I went to the Tacoma Public Library, and I got so much information that way. That was hugely helpful. So afterwards, I actually went to the zoo, having a manuscript in my hand. And I thought, this is so cool. And I showed the zoo and I said, look, I've written a book about one of your animals. And they were like, yeah, lady, heard that one before. They did let me in for free, but that was it. I was hoping to get to see him, to go behind the scenes, and couldn't do it. No. It was raining that day and he never came out. But it was somehow mitigated by the fact that John Schumacher, who you know, who spends a lot of money here.
We call him the mayor of Anderson's, if you want to know, because he's here almost every day.
Really put him on commission.
We should. Yeah.
He took the book down after it was published with Donna, and they took a road trip down, and he actually got Ivan to sign the book. He was finger painting that day. He loved to do that, and he has a thumbprint on John's book, which I thought was very touching.
So how much, you had to add fiction, of course, to the novel, because we have his keeper, or Mac is his name, who's not particularly the you know, the best guy and all that. But adding Stella and the other characters, and we don't want to say too much about it because then we'll have some spoilers of those who haven't read it. So how much of that was real of the story of the other animals that Ivan was in that you know, in that Wakoma Mall Zoo, you know?
That was an interesting thing to attempt, and I had some doubts about it because I, of course, wanted to stay as close to reality as I could.
Right.
But I realized, for example, I mean, it was like this was an animal in a cage for 27 years. There was, you know, who's my interlocutor? Who am I interacting with? So I knew he needed someone to talk to. I originally had a roach because I wanted somebody who could get into the cage. That wasn't really working for me, so I moved up to a rat, and then I thought, you know what, I'm writing fiction here. Put a hole in the cage and let a little dog go in there, and thus Bob.
Bob was great.
I liked Bob. Bob was modeled on my own really bratty dog named Stan, and from there, other necessities became really evident. For example, I needed a human, and that became Julia, who was based on my daughter. And along the way, I sprinkled in as much of the reality of the places I could. I mentioned a seal who ate pennies and died, and that really happened. They had a seal there. They had a chicken, I think, who was riding a fire truck around. Don't ask me how that was possible. They had a variety of animals over the years, and so I incorporated that as much as I could.
Sure. So when you write, and you've written so many books, I don't know how many it is at this point that you and many.
Some
you and
might say
Michael.
too many.
No. But do you, especially in a series, because you've written many series, do you sit down to outline? And with a book like The One and Only Ivan, was it more of it just kind of flowed? I mean, surprising us, is it surprising you with what's happening? You know where it's going, but do you sit down and outline? A series you must have a way
Series
to,
you do, and I've done a lot of those with my husband Michael Grant, and we will do a series Bible, put it together. We'll have character pictures and biographies, and they can be pretty thick and pretty intense. We don't always follow them. When we did Animorphs, which was a long-running series, about 63 books, and we wrote many of them. We had some ghostwriters along the way too. Those were done a book a month, which was unheard.
Wow.
Now
That's
no one
crazy.
does that.
Yeah, that is
and I had a newborn baby, and we were tired. But as we did them, kids would acquire morphs and be able to turn into animals, and we found over time we were just forgetting, even having a Bible. Somebody actually put a website up called KASU, and it stood for Katherine Applegate Screw-Ups, and it was all the morphs that we'd messed up over the years.
That's so interesting.
It's very hard with series when they get long.
Well, it's like, you know, you're building these worlds, and you got to have rules, and
Exactly.
kids will catch everything when you
They
make a
are
mistake.
so good. I do events, and I have grad students who read Animorphs still bugging me about stuff. Why did you do that?
So I want to know what the book you have coming out in September, because I saw the cover of it, and I've heard about it from my Macmillan rep. It's a Fywell and Friends book called Crenshaw.
It is. I'm so excited about it.
But the cover is, it's imaginary friend.
Right.
A huge cat named
Crenshaw.
So a little bit of Harvey in there, right?
Oh yes. In fact, I was excited because I have my epigraph is a quote from Harvey. I love Harvey. Harvey's one of my favorite movies. Man, that is so beautifully written. If you ever get a chance to just look at the play, even without Jimmy Stewart there, it's amazing. It's hilarious.
I've seen it on stage. It's fantastic.
Oh, I bet it was great.
Yeah, it was great. But it's such a great story.
But
that whole imaginary thing, you know, we just had Imaginary Friend book just win the Caldecott, you know, when you think about it.
Oh, I love Beagle.
But so Crenshaw, tell us a little about Crenshaw, and give us a little sneak peek, but not too much of a spoiler, because we want to read it for ourselves.
I'm really excited about it. I love it, and when it took me a long time to love it, but when you fall in love with a book, then you know you're doing something right, and that's a really good feeling. Little boy in a heap of trouble with a family that is having financial trouble. I wanted to kind of touch on that because it's such a big problem, and even hungry sometimes, even dealing with a lot of stuff that kids do deal with. and he's a very practical kid, a very down-to-earth scientist, wants to grow up to be a scientist. And to his shock, his childhood imaginary friend returns in this time of crisis, quite unbidden. And he's kind of a pain in the butt, but there he is. And Crenshaw is sitting in his bathtub one evening, taking a bubble bath and asking if he has any purple jelly beans. And this child has to suddenly deal with this weird confluence of reality and fantasy. Is he hallucinating? Is this real? But it's been really fun to write.
Yeah,
really fun.
I bet. Well, I don't know who did the illustration from the image I saw, but the cover looks incredible.
Isn't that a great cover?
It's a
I
great
was
cover.
Thrilled with it.
So I know you have cats. So any bit of your cats in Crenshaw?
Well, to the extent that my cats are
They don't talk
difficult,
to you. Right. That's right. Like, yeah. Okay,
yeah. So
okay.
there's a bit of that. There's a bit. He's a funny character, a bit of a snob, and yet, I mean, the first thing he says is, let's go in your parents' room. I want to go walk on their heads. And because, of course, that's what a cat would do. And
right.
Jackson says, that's really not a good idea. And he says, let's go do your sister. And he says, she might wake up, and there are questions about whether she has a litter box in her room. He's a cat. He thinks
Right.
like a cat.
Yeah, right,
so,
right.
So that's fun to do.
No,
and
that
so
would
I'm
be
back
great.
in an animal hut, which seems to be a place
yeah.
I need to go.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. So all the series that you and Michael did together, and there's some that you had in your other books under some pseudonyms.
Oh, yes, many.
Right? Ready? Yeah. So tell us about that first published book, that came out, or maybe even the first one when Animorphs first started. Did you guys have any idea that it would explode like that? It would be 60 plus books in the
of course
entire
not.
I mean, did that just blow you guys away when Animorphs? Because like you said, so many kids that are in college or older talk about these books. And how they could not get them fast enough, Yeah.
Had an amazing kind of cultish following.
Right.
There is still fan fiction going on for Animorphs. It's the coolest thing when you meet these kids now grown up, because it really affected them. And there were some dark moments in Animorphs. We started out, it was lots of sound effects and craziness and aliens and kids turning into animals, but it was essentially a war story. It went on for years, and we tried to end it on a kind of grace note that still acknowledged that war is hard and bad things happen.
Yeah.
So I'll have 25-year-olds at the back of a book event raise their hands and say, why did you end it that way? They're still bitter. But they'll also say that they understand now.
Yeah, okay.
That
They needed to mature a little bit, right, to get that. Yeah. So what do you remember that first recollection of wanting to, maybe, I want to grow up to be a writer? Or was it something that didn't occur to you until later?
I avoided it as long as humanly possible. I was one of those people. It seemed like the most public way to fail. I was terrified. I was an English major.
Right.
And I did a bit of writing along the way. But I felt that it was something I might have a certain facility for. But, the idea of doing it publicly. So I became like the world's worst waitress and the world's worst plant waterer. And I always tell kids this, because it's not a career path I recommend, avoiding something because you're afraid of it. Finally dipped my toe in the water with ghostwriting. And that kind of got me comfortable with the idea.
Right. So how many books would you say, with all the series, all the pseudonyms you've written under, and you have some great names,
Yes.
I love Katherine Kendall.
We don't that Katherine Kendall. Katherine Kendall goes back to my Harlequin days.
I know, but when you think about all that, it's all just great experience.
It
so
is.
It all builds into
totally.
Yeah.
In fact, those were really hard to write.
I can imagine.
I don't know, maybe 150 to 200, but a lot of those were with my husband. So it's, we get half credit. But they were, all of them very useful in terms of learning the craft, learning to deal with deadlines. Still working on that one, but but just how a story is put together,
Right. So did you, when Ivan died, and I think he had been at Zoo Atlanta for how many years after he had been moved to the...
He was 50 and 27, so it was about half and half.
Right. And when he died, and it was in 2012, did you go to the memorial service, or did...
Yes,
I
did.
Tell me about that. That
it
must
was
have been
cool.
Yeah.
I told Michael I was going to a gorilla funeral in Atlanta, and you can imagine how supportive he was.
I can kind of hear what he's saying in my head right now. Okay.
But it was so cool. It was really touching. They had people came from all over.
Yeah.
All of whom had been touched by this one western lowland gorilla that had changed the way people perceived how captive animals should be treated. And they told funny stories, and his keeper was up there talking about he had a sombrero he wore one day, and the other gorillas were like, dude, we don't wear clothes, we're gorillas. And he ate the middle of it and wore it as a necklace for the rest of the day. And it was just very charming. He was quite a quirky guy and very beloved. Very beloved.
So that must have been really wonderful. So
it was very touching.
So besides Crenshaw, which we hope to see next September, I think the 15th. I looked up the date because we are waiting for that day. Anything else you got in the works, or anything else besides like Even Adam with Michael or anything?
We felt maybe once a decade we'll do that. We don't want to push the envelope.
Okay. All right.
I have a trilogy that
cool.
I'm doing with HarperCollins.
Okay.
And the catalyst for this is kind of interesting. What my son likes to hang out on Reddit, and he came across this word, endling, which has been coined recently to describe the last of a species. And I thought it was a really compelling word, and I created a trilogy out of it. And basically went to them with a couple sentences and said, come on guys, this is the coolest idea. And they went, yeah. So that is my next big project.
Okay, cool. And that'll be middle grade or YA?
Middle grade.
Middle grade. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool.
So it's going to be fun.
Okay. Well, we'll wait for that one. Okay, so I end these interviews with a little quiz. So this is lightning round.
Oh,
no, you know all the answers. You're guaranteed. Alex Trebek will go, yay to go. Okay.
Okay.
So whatever comes to your mind first. Most are book related. Okay. So favorite book when you were a kid?
Charlotte's Web.
Okay. Okay. How about a book you've been an evangelist for, that no matter what you've read your entire life, you told so many people they had to read this one?
Just off the top of my head, I love Kathy Applegate's work. I think she's so remarkable, and I love what she does with words. And so I pushed underneath on a lot of people because I just think it was so gorgeously written.
Well, do you remember something you read when your kids were younger? You loved to curl up and read together.
I actually included it in Crenshaw. 2 books. One, my mother still remembers this book by heart. The House on East 88th Street, Lyle the Crocodile. Oh my gosh, we were all obsessed in my family with that book. I don't know why. Madeline, of course. And do you remember A Hole Is to Dig?
Oh, I love any of those ones that Maurice Sendak.
Sendak and Krauss. And I'm actually referencing that throughout Crenshaw.
Oh, are you really?
Yeah.
That was my younger brother's favorite book. My mom read it to him endlessly.
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah,
It's just, it's so adorable.
Okay, and how about your favorite Michael Grant book?
Oh, no pressure there. Oh, let me tell you about the one he's working on.
Tell me that.
Because it's what better place to pitch a book.
Okay.
It's really cool. It's an alternate history, and it is World War II. Women have been allowed to be drafted. And and these are like really kick-ass girls. And it's going to be wonderful. Wow. It's really fun.
Cool. All right. So tell Michael he's got to come back for that one.
Oh, he will.
Okay. And anything you're reading right now that you really like?
Oh, I'm rereading Because of Winn-Dixie, interestingly enough, which I've read a million times.
Yeah.
But I wanted to read it for the rhythm. Because Crenshaw's about the same length. And it's so lovely.
Okay. Well, great. Well, Katherine, thanks for coming, and thanks for sitting down with me.
Oh,
and you have to come back when Crenshaw comes out. So.
I will be here. Anderson's is the folks who have access to Anderson's are very lucky indeed.
Thank you. Well, thank you, and thanks for talking with me. Thank you. What a great conversation. One of my favorite authors, Katherine Applegate, who won the Newbery Medal for the one and only Ivan, and her new nonfiction piece, Ivan, the Remarkable True Story. Thanks for joining me on Authors Revealed.